Welcome to the Putback on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we're here with you with two fantastic guests to talk Knicks for the next half hour. First off, we have Mr. Chuck D, Public Enemy, Grammy Lifetime Achievement winner, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member, and a big-time Knick fan. If you're on Twitter, I'm sure you already know about his Knick fandom. Very lucky to have Chuck today. And we have Mr. Dan Graca, pre and post ESPN radio, has his own ESPN radio show. He's all over the Knicks as well. So, guys, we're going to get into it all, but we're going to start with the baseline here. Big win for the Knicks, Game 4 in Philadelphia. What should have been hostile territory wasn't that hostile, it turned out, but just a fantastic performance up and down the roster, starting with Jalen Brunson, obviously. Franchise playoff record, 47 points, 10 assists, but really, you look up and down, you look at the bench, you look at the other stars, everybody had a big moment, it seemed, in this game, particularly down the stretch. OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, defending Joel Embiid in that fourth quarter. And Chuck, for you, you have watched this team for a long time. Where would you rank that performance by Jalen Brunson, Game 4, all time?
Oh, it was and peace out to you, man. Big fan for so many years. I hit you up always on social media, follow you. But it coincidentally it breaks Bernard King's record with a Bernard King-like performance. As far as the game, I rank it like top 5 as a Knick fan, and I was happy to be a Knick fan ever since 1967. By my dad. So I've seen a lot of Knick contests, but that performance top 5, and I know maybe there's more to come, but it was almost like when Embiid threw that skeptical elbow, and Jalen Brunson, like, what you do that for? It reminded me of a incident way back in the 70s when I think Phil Chenier pushed Walt Frazier. And I don't know if it was a playoff game, but the rivalry was intense and Clyde just went off. That reminded me yesterday of Bernard King, Walt Frazier, when he got pushed. It just took him to another level. It's one of those, like, all I needed was that to happen.
Yeah, you're talking about the highest stratosphere of Knicks performers all time there. Just a remarkable game from Brunson. And Dan, when you think about games 1 and 2 for Brunson, and I thought he was very good in Game 3, Knick lost, and then just to another level on Sunday. What do you make of first 2 games of the series versus the most recent 2 for Brunson?
Well, I'll tell you guys, the first 2 games, it was a little concerning, right? Because we hadn't really seen back-to-back games for Jalen Brunson where he struggled to that extent. Now, I say struggled because he set the bar so high throughout the regular season. But then you also take the body of work against this Sixers team, even in the regular season meetings. And you know what? They have a matchup that somehow gives Jalen Brunson problems. We talk about the length that they defend him with and the shooting numbers, the points, all that stuff. Didn't really add up to what we were accustomed to seeing from him all year. But then Game 3 was a step in the right direction, more like the old Brunson, as you guys said, even though the Knicks couldn't find a way to get the win. And then yesterday is one they're going to be talking about for years and years and years to come. I mean, I don't know what more you can say, but I think that if you're anybody in Sixers land right now, you're probably thinking, all right, we've done all we could, but the real Jalen Brunson is back.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's going to be interesting to see how Philadelphia reacts Tuesday, Game 5 at the Garden. Do they fold up the tent? Does Embiid come out and try to dominate and get the Sixers back to the Wells Fargo Center? I guess you could still call it the Wells Fargo Center after Sunday. Does he try to get him back there for Game 6? It's going to be, a big moment for this Sixers team and really Embiid, I think, his era here in Philadelphia. But let's get back to the Knicks here because you talk about Embiid and you talk about, the 1 point in the fourth quarter. I know a lot of people are saying that he was tired. Nick Nurse probably shouldn't have played him that many consecutive minutes. And I understand that. I totally get it. But at the same time, if you're a star, don't you have to carry your team in that moment when the Knicks are down one center. The other center is on the bench with foul trouble. You're facing their third string big man. No disrespect at all to Precious Achiuwa, who is a very, very fine player, and OG Anunoby, who you have several inches on and many pounds on. You should, I think, score in those moments and deliver, and credit to the Knicks defense for what they were able to do. And Chuck, you look at the two guys I mentioned, OG, Precious Achiuwa, obviously coming over from the Toronto trade. I mean, looking back on that deal and looking at last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say, just your thoughts on the deal and its impact on the franchise.
Oh, tremendous. The fact that, you heard OG says, listen, me and Precious already played together, and we were also accustomed to like trapping off something. And it was almost like they threw a cage around Joel Embiid. And, OG went one-on-one in many cases, but then Precious cheated and came in. It was sort of like this cage, and Precious has this kinetic energy with him as well, along with the wingspan. I think it gave him an issue. Now, here's another thing. I think what we're looking at is a new type of NBA coming in, meaning that Thibodeau has come in with the mentality of,
I think we lost Chuck there for a minute. I'm sure we'll get Chuck back momentarily. But Dan, for you, kind of similar topic, but with Anunoby and what he's done, I think games 3 and 4, he started to get going offensively. How important is he, I should say, to where the Knicks are right now, and obviously what they want to do moving forward if you look ahead to maybe Indiana and Pascal Siakam?
No, you're absolutely right about that, and no irony, right? Because they're both former Toronto Raptors when you bring up Pascal Siakam there. But look, yesterday you could make the case, Ian, that might have been OG Anunoby's best game as a Knick, period, not just in this series. And remember all that talk during his regular season run with the team, and they were piling up all the wins with him in the lineup, and he had these outrageous plus-minus numbers with him on the floor. OG Anunoby was a minus player for the first 3 games of this series. And you're like, we're not used to seeing this. And then yesterday, completely forget it. And going into the series, Ian, remember, like, OG Anunoby is a guy who the Knicks are going to put on the best scorer on the other team more often than not. But coming into the Philly matchup, you're like, well, how's he going to be able to stop a guy like Joel Embiid? That's not the matchup for him. He's given up a lot of length. He's given up size, weight, you name it. But the fact that he took on the assignment yesterday with Mitchell Robinson down, you throw in what Precious Achiuwa did, as Chuck was saying there. I mean, that's the epitome of a team right there. These guys doing whatever they have to do for the good of the team, even if they are at a somewhat disadvantage. And look, you can't say anything more about the effort that group gave you over 48 minutes yesterday. I mean, Precious Achiuwa playing the entire fourth quarter. And I know you brought up the trade. I mean, think back to the fact, and we said this so many times, Precious Achiuwa was essentially like a throw-in that trade, right? A lot of people regarded him as just that it was OG Anunoby was the big piece. And think about when his number has been called. And he hadn't played all that much this series so far, but for him to step up like he did yesterday, I don't know if the Knicks win that game without him.
Yeah, I mean, Achiuwa did not play first 2 games. He came on the floor when Mitch Robinson got hurt in game 3. And, he just has done a lot for a player who was totally out of the rotation to start this series. We asked him about that yesterday. You just talked about that's being a professional. That's what you do as a professional player. You stay ready, you stay prepared, and Precious delivered in a huge way. And talking about OG Anunoby, Dan, in particular, he said he wanted that assignment yesterday. He wanted Joel Embiid, and he took that assignment, and he really was a main reason why the Knicks were able to close things out in Philly. Chuck, I'm coming back to you now. Thank you for jumping back on here. Your opinion of Joel Embiid after watching him night in and night out in this series, has it changed? And if it has, how has it changed?
My opinion hasn't changed on him. He's a monster. He's a wall. I think the Philadelphia management has failed the city. I think it's failed Joel Embiid. I think he's a dude where they're saying, okay, yeah, he's a dirty player, but he's a wall, man. He's 7'2", 280, man. I don't like the way he flopped all the way. He's always flopping on the court like some giant amoeba because he's bound to cause injury. He's a former soccer player. he has ballet type tendencies. He could kind of like throw his body at half the team and just have a specific hit, and him being able to get up unhurt, but everybody wondering like what hit me, a tidal wave, a tsunami.
Yes.
But I don't think he's intentionally dirty. I think he's just using his tactics. And I think the Knicks' best tactic is doing like, we will wear you out. 48 minutes, 94 feet. Philadelphia couldn't breathe the last 5 minutes. They were sucking for air. When the Knicks had that 5 offensive rebound possession, Philly was cooked. They was done, man. Matter of fact, it took the air out of Wells Fargo as well. The Knicks will wear your brains out. They will scratch your face off, man. And that to me, like, that just left me to the point where I was like, I haven't seen many teams like this. I think Miami Heat culture is the precedent, and Tom Thibodeau is similar. And if you don't face the Knicks condition, you will lose that final 4 minutes. That's why with the Knicks, with our lineup, we're not a runaway team. However, the Knicks are a team, if they stay close, those last 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, that's why the Knicks have always been an uphill trying to come back if they're down type team. If we fall 30 behind, we'll probably end up losing by 9. If we're close, the Knicks, the last 6 minutes are carnivorous, bro. Carnivorous.
It's absolutely right. It's the perfect word to describe what you saw yesterday. And Chuck, I'm interested in this question for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, if my math is off. I believe 9 years old you were in '69. And so I don't know how much you saw of that team or the next title team, but this team right now, in terms of your enjoyment or your belief, where do you put this team in the teams that you've watched from the Knicks over the years?
It's reminiscent of the UB Brown teams, where you have Bernard King and the rest of the Knicks came at you. UB Brown had 2 lineups. He had 2 centers, Cartwright, Marvin Webster. They came at you. They were relentless. They were 48 minutes. And
I think we lost Chuck right there. So I think we have Dan. We have Dan back. Yes, we do. We do have
I'm
Dan
here,
back.
buddy.
Dan, you have been watching the Knicks for a long time as well. You've been watching these teams in recent years very specifically, night in, night out. When you look at this group, where would you rank it in terms of the teams since you've been paying close attention? I mean, 2012, 2013, they had a great year. But in terms of where they are right now and what they can build off of, where would you put them?
Well, you know what's interesting? I think you have to take like this one on a specific basis, Ian, because I think you have to factor in not having Julius Randle, right? Because really, Jalen Brunson is the guy who is your really only primary dynamic scorer. Now, Julius Randle's an all-star player, but the fact that he hasn't been part of this ride, unfortunately, you have to kind of push it aside. Just the way this team plays, it's a little like I can almost make the comparison to the 90s Knicks a little bit, because remember all those years, Patrick Ewing was the dude. He was the guy. He was the all-star. But he never had consistently throughout his career like a bona fide number 2, like a Robin to his Batman. Starks was a nice player, made an all-star team. Oakley did his thing. But there was never really that like legitimate number 2 guy. And I think that Brunson is kind of dealing with that right now.
Man, we are getting hammered by the internet today. No Dan, no Chuck. Maybe those guys will jump back with us. Maybe we'll give it a minute here. But the one thing that you heard again and again in the locker room yesterday was Game 5. Game 5, getting ready for Game 5. Got to get better for Game 5. Got to look at what we can fix heading into Game 5. And you heard it not only from Tom Thibodeau, you'd expect it from the head coach, but you heard it from everybody who spoke to the media, whether it was Josh Hart, Miles McBride, Isaiah Hartenstein, Precious Achua, OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson. It was they were talking about how they felt good about this win, but they were ready to turn the page to Tuesday. And to me, that's a sign of a team that has the correct mindset and the mindset that can help you make a long playoff run. They're not worried about 5 minutes ago. They're worried about 5 minutes from now or the next night. And it sounds like a cliche, but just being around this group and having heard how they talk about their approach and having watched them, night in and night out over the last 2 years, I don't think it's a cliche with this team. I really think that they have this mindset where, hey, we want to get better today, or we want to get better tomorrow. We want to clean up what went wrong, and let's keep trying to get better. And that's a mindset that I haven't seen a lot in a lot of Knick teams over the last 10 plus years. I mean, maybe the 12-13 Woodson team, but this team, it just seems to be locked in on the things that matter, the things that help you win games. And to me, if you're a Knick fan and you've been through a lot, maybe you're hesitant to trust what you're seeing. I understand that, but it seems like there's something sustainable here. It seems like there's a foundation here where you can build a winning program that can be competent and competitive for several years. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens Tuesday. Game 5 at the Garden, Knicks having a chance to close things out. We're going to close out the show momentarily, but I think if we have Chuck back, I would love to ask Chuck a couple other questions. One, Chuck, for you, we talked a little bit about this before the show. Basketball players, sometimes they want to be entertainers. They want to be in your business. And for you, who you've listened to over the years, who do you think is the best rapper as a basketball player who's tried to do it?
Well, we have to give props to Shaq. He was the first platinum rapper. He was in the mix. Dame Lillard today. But I tell you, underrated, Dana Barros from back in the day. Yeah, definitely had bars. That's it.
Unfortunately, I saw Chuck. I couldn't hear Chuck. I don't know if Chuck could hear me, or if I hope the audience heard Chuck, because I would love to hear his thoughts on that. Maybe I'll ask him another time. But Chuck, we can't thank you enough for your time, man. We really, really appreciate it. Dan Graca, Chuck D joining us to break all things Knicks down here on the Putback. That'll do it for us for today. Knicks Game 5 at the Garden tomorrow night, and we'll see where the series goes from there. But as far as the Putback, we'll be back with you either some point later this series or ahead of round 2. And be sure to keep an eye on Honda Sports Night every night for your Knicks coverage.